Nobody knew what was about to happen that night. August 3rd, 2001. The Staples Center's Auxiliary Arena in downtown Los Angeles was packed wall to wall. Police officers in dress uniforms lined the front rows. Families of fallen LAPD heroes sat in reserved sections, tears already forming in some eyes before the event even began. Local news cameras positioned themselves strategically. This was supposed to be a feel-good charity exhibition, a night to honor the badge, raise funds for the Widows and Orphans Fund, and maybe see some Hollywood celebrities throw a few staged punches. What they got instead would become the most talked-about moment in celebrity exhibition history. The LAPD's annual charity gala had featured celebrity appearances before. Basketball players shooting hoops with kids, comedians doing stand-up sets. But this year, someone in the department had a different idea. Rush Hour 2 was about to premiere in just weeks. Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker, the unstoppable duo who had conquered box offices worldwide, were in Los Angeles for promotional duties. When the LAPD's community outreach coordinator pitched the idea of a friendly sparring exhibition to the film's publicity team, everyone thought it was brilliant, harmless, fun. Two movie stars pretending to fight for a good cause. Nobody anticipated the egos that would walk into that ring. Behind the scenes, 3 hours before showtime, tension was already brewing in ways the organizers couldn't have predicted. Jackie Chan arrived first, as he always did. Punctuality was embedded in his Hong Kong cinema DNA. At 47 years old, his body carried the evidence of 1,000 stunts, scars mapped across his skin like a road atlas of pain. He walked through the backstage area with his small entourage, nodding politely to police officers who approached for autographs, his mind already calculating angles and movements. Chris Tucker showed up 45 minutes later. The 29-year-old comedian was riding an unprecedented wave of Hollywood success. His $20 million paycheck for Rush Hour 2 had made headlines, nearly triple what Jackie earned for the same film. That disparity had created an invisible friction between them during filming, the kind neither man acknowledged publicly, but both felt privately. Chris entered with his characteristic energy, voice carrying through hallways, laughter infectious. But those close to him noticed something else, a competitive edge that hadn't been there during the first Rush Hour film. "Man, you ready for this?" Chris asked, when he finally found Jackie in the makeshift dressing area. Jackie looked up from wrapping his hands. "Ready for what? It's just exhibition, for police families." "Yeah, but you know people gonna be watching. Gotta give them a show." Something in Chris's tone made Jackie pause. It wasn't the friendly banter they usually shared. There was challenge underneath it, pride, maybe even a hint of disrespect, though Jackie couldn't quite place why he felt that way. "I always give show," Jackie replied carefully. 40 years I give show." Chris grinned, but his eyes didn't soften. 40 years of movie magic, sure, but this different, Jackie. This is more real." The words hung in the air between them. Jackie's expression didn't change, but anyone who knew him would have recognized the subtle tightening around his eyes. In the Hong Kong film industry, questioning a martial artist's authenticity wasn't just an insult, it was a declaration. "We see," Jackie said quietly. The arena filled quickly. By 7 p.m., every seat was occupied. The demographic was unusual for a boxing exhibition. Off-duty cops and their families mixed with Rush Hour fans who'd somehow heard about the event. News crews from local stations set up, initially treating this as a light human interest story. The mayor of Los Angeles gave a brief opening speech about community and sacrifice. Then the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, for one night only, a special exhibition match between two of Hollywood's biggest action stars." The crowd erupted. Chris Tucker emerged first, wearing red boxing trunks and a white tank top, bouncing on his feet, shadowboxing as he made his way to the ring. His reach was immediately apparent, those long arms cutting through the air with surprising speed. Many people didn't know this about Chris Tucker. Before comedy took over his life, he'd trained seriously in boxing as a teenager in Atlanta. It hadn't been just a hobby. He'd competed in amateur circuits, won regional matches. That foundation never left his muscle memory. "Y'all ready for this?" Chris shouted to the crowd, his trademark grin stretching across his face. The audience laughed and cheered. This was the Chris Tucker they knew. Loud, confident, magnetic. Then Jackie Chan's music hit. The traditional Chinese instrumental music was a stark contrast to Chris's hip-hop entrance. Jackie walked out in simple black training gear, no theatrics, no dancing. His face was serious in a way that made some audience members stop cheering. This wasn't the goofy Jackie from the movies. This was someone else. Someone who'd broken nearly every bone in his body for his art. Someone who'd studied under masters in the Peking Opera School, where mistakes were punished with bamboo canes and success meant survival. He climbed through the ropes with economical grace and stood in his corner, eyes locked on Chris. The referee, an actual LAPD officer who'd volunteered for the role, called both men to the center of the ring. "Gentlemen, this is an exhibition. Keep it light, keep it safe, keep it fun. Protect yourselves at all times." Chris nodded enthusiastically. Jackie said nothing. They touched gloves. And then Chris Tucker said the words that would change everything. As they turned back to their corners, Chris paused, looked directly at Jackie, and with his voice loud enough for the front rows to hear, "I'm done living in your shadow, Jackie Chan. Done being second. Tonight I prove I'm more than just the funny guy." The crowd gasped. Some laughed, thinking it was part of the show, but those watching Jackie's face saw something different. The mask of politeness cracked just slightly. His jaw tightened. In Chinese martial arts culture, such a statement before a match, even an exhibition, carried weight. It was a challenge that demanded response. The bell rang. Chris came forward immediately, demonstrating exactly what he'd claimed. His jab was sharp and fast, snapping out with legitimate boxing technique. He wasn't playing around. Each punch had intention behind it. His footwork was clean, the kind you only get from real training. He circled left, using his reach advantage, keeping Jackie at distance. Jackie slipped the first few jabs with minimal head movement, his decades of experience showing in how little energy he wasted. But Chris was faster than Jackie had expected. Younger, hungry to prove something. A straight right-hand shot toward Jackie's face, real power behind it. Jackie's head moved just 2 inches to the side, the punch whistling past his ear. The crowd reacted with collective, "Ooh!" But Jackie didn't counter, not yet. He was studying, calculating, remembering every sparring session from his youth when his teachers would tell him, "Let your opponent show you everything first." Chris, emboldened by his success, pressed forward. Another combination, jab, jab, right cross. Jackie blocked the first two, but the cross caught him on the shoulder, forcing him back a step. It was the first real contact of the match, and the impact was solid. Chris's strength was legitimate. "Come on, Jackie," Chris taunted, bouncing on his toes. "Show me that kung fu." The crowd was getting louder now, divided. Half were cheering for Chris, caught up in his charisma. The other half sensed something deeper happening, a real clash of styles, of generations, of philosophies. Jackie's corner of supporters, mostly Chinese-American fans who understood the cultural implications, sat tense. They knew Jackie wasn't angry. Anger made fighters sloppy. Jackie was focused in a way that preceded something inevitable. Then Jackie moved. It wasn't the flashy kung fu from movies. It was the efficient, practical Wing Chun he'd learned as a foundation before opera school. He closed the distance in one explosive step, so fast that Chris's next jab was still forming. Jackie's lead hand trapped Chris's extended arm at the wrist while simultaneously delivering a palm strike to Chris's chest. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to send Chris stumbling backward. The crowd exploded. Chris's eyes widened. That was real. No wires, no camera tricks, no stunt doubles. Pure technique executed at a speed his boxing training hadn't prepared him for. He recovered quickly, respect flickering across his face, even as his competitive nature refused to back down. All right, Chris said, resetting his stance. I see you. The next 2 minutes became a fascinating study in contrasts. Chris utilized textbook boxing, jabs to set up power punches, pivoting to create angles, using his superior reach. Every fundamental was sound. If this had been a pure boxing match, his advantages would have been overwhelming. But Jackie wasn't boxing. Every time Chris committed to a combination, Jackie would fade just outside range, then counter with something Chris had no frame of reference for. A low kick to the thigh, not hard but precise, that made Chris's stance falter. A trapping hand technique that immobilized Chris's punching arm for a split second. An angle of entry that came from 45 degrees instead of straight on, completely bypassing Chris's guard. The audience was transfixed. This wasn't the choreographed movie fighting they'd expected. This was two legitimate combat athletes operating in completely different systems. And somehow, both systems were working. A reporter from the Los Angeles Times, initially covering the event as a feel-good piece, was now frantically taking notes. This was a story. The photographer beside her was burning through film, capturing every moment. But something was shifting in the ring. Chris, despite his youth and speed advantages, was starting to realize he was in over his head. Not because Jackie was hitting him, Jackie was deliberately pulling every technique, but because of the sheer variety of attacks coming from angles Chris's boxing instincts couldn't predict. It was like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces kept changing shape. Jackie, for his part, felt the old familiar surge he hadn't experienced in years. Not anger, never anger, but something closer to artistic expression under pressure. This was the essence of what he'd trained for as a child. Not performance, not stunts, but the raw application of skill against a resisting opponent. Chris's athleticism was forcing Jackie to dig deeper into his arsenal than he'd needed to in decades. Then Chris made a mistake born of frustration. He loaded up for a haymaker right hand, big, telegraphed, too much power, and not enough setup. It was the kind of punch that works in street fights or against untrained opponents, but is suicide against someone with Jackie's experience. Jackie saw it coming from miles away. What happened next occurred in less than 2 seconds, but would be replayed in slow-motion memory for everyone watching. Jackie didn't just dodge the punch. He ducked under it, pivoted on his lead foot, and executed a textbook sweep kick. Not the flashy high kicks from movies, but a low, grinding sweep that took Chris's front leg completely out from under him. Chris Tucker fell, not hard, not dangerously, but he fell, landing on his back with his arms splayed out, looking up at the arena lights with an expression of pure disbelief. The crowd went absolutely insane. Jackie stood over him, extending a hand. For a moment, maybe 3 seconds, Chris just stared at that offered hand, his pride wrestling with reality. Then he started laughing. That genuine, infectious Chris Tucker laugh that had made him famous. "Man!" Chris grabbed Jackie's hand and was pulled to his feet. "What the hell was that?" "That was kung fu," Jackie said simply, but there was a hint of a smile now. The referee stepped between them, technically calling the exhibition at that point. But neither man was listening. They were staring at each other with a new understanding. Chris, breathing hard, wiped sweat from his forehead. Jackie, real talk. His voice dropped lower, sincere. I thought I could hang. I really did. Man, you're the real deal. Jackie nodded slowly. You very fast. Very strong. If you train Kung Fu 10 years, maybe I worry. 10 years? Chris laughed again. Man, I don't got 10 years. I got movies to make. The crowd was still roaring, but both men raised their arms together, acknowledging the audience. The competitive tension had transformed into something else, mutual respect forged through the brief combat. Chris had challenged a legend and learned why legends exist. Jackie had been reminded that young talent, even without his years of experience, could push him in unexpected ways. As they exited the ring together, Chris threw an arm around Jackie's shoulders. Next time, we just stick to the movie choreography, all right? Movie choreography much safer, Jackie agreed. But anyone watching closely would have seen the small, satisfied smile on Jackie's face, and the way Chris kept glancing at him with newfound reverence. The dynamics between them had shifted. The paycheck disparity didn't matter anymore. The Hollywood pecking order didn't matter. In that ring, for those few minutes, the only thing that mattered was skill, and skill had spoken clearly. The LAPD's charity event raised over $300,000 that night, 3 times their initial goal. But the real story wasn't the money. In the days that followed, rumors spread through Hollywood like wildfire. Entertainment Weekly ran a piece titled Chan vs. Tucker, the exhibition that became real. The footage was analyzed by martial arts experts on cable news programs, boxing commentators weighed in, film critics wrote think pieces about the nature of action stars and authentic combat sports. But the two people at the center of the storm weren't fueling the fire. Chris Tucker, in interviews promoting Rush Hour 2, would smile and deflect. Jackie's the best. I learned that night. Real recognize real. Jackie, in his characteristically humble way, would say, Chris, very talented, good athlete. We just have fun for police families. What neither said publicly was how their relationship deepened after that night. The unspoken hierarchy that had existed, with Chris as the bigger star by Hollywood's financial metrics, evaporated. When Rush Hour 2 premiered 2 weeks later, their on-screen chemistry had evolved. There was an authenticity in their mock fights that hadn't existed before because Chris now understood viscerally what Jackie brought to the table. On set for Rush Hour 3 years later, when choreographing fight scenes, Chris would defer to Jackie's judgment in ways he never had before. And Jackie, for his part, would push Chris harder physically, knowing the younger man could handle more than he'd previously given him credit for. The boxing gloves Chris wore that night in the Staples Center Auxiliary Arena now hang in his home office, signed by Jackie with a simple message in Chinese characters, strong and fast. But remember, technique defeats strength. Chris had it translated and framed next to the gloves. Jackie keeps nothing from that night in his personal collection. He never does. For him, the experience itself was the keepsake. The reminder that respect isn't given, it's earned, and sometimes it's earned in the most unexpected ways. The young police officers who organized the event had no idea what they'd created. They thought they were booking 2 movie stars for a light exhibition. Instead, they'd orchestrated a genuine test, not of egos, but of different philosophies of combat. Western boxing versus Eastern martial arts. Youth versus experience, raw athleticism versus refined technique. And in the end, what the audience witnessed wasn't a victory or a defeat. It was a conversation conducted in the language of combat, a dialogue between 2 men who respected each other's craft enough to push boundaries while knowing exactly when to pull back. But make no mistake, beneath the charity veneer and the feel-good aftermath, something real had happened in that ring. Chris Tucker had challenged a legend and learned a lesson that no amount of Hollywood success could have taught him. Jackie Chan had been reminded why he'd spent his entire life perfecting his art, why every broken bone and every scar mattered. Years later, at a private dinner celebrating the Rush Hour franchise's cultural impact, a reporter asked both men about that night. Chris and Jackie exchanged a glance, the kind of look shared by people who'd been through something meaningful together. "You know what I learned," Chris said, choosing his words carefully. "I learned that there's strong, there's fast, and then there's mastery, and mastery's a different level entirely." Jackie raised his glass. "And I learned that young people today, they not afraid of challenge. This is good. Keep old people honest." They clinked glasses, and in that moment, every unspoken tension from August 3rd, 2001, dissolved completely. The challenge had been issued. The challenge had been answered, and both men had grown from it. The LAPD still talks about that night. It's become part of department legend, the night two Hollywood stars put on the most authentic exhibition anyone had ever seen at a police charity event. The funds raised helped dozens of families. The footage is still passed around on YouTube, analyzed frame by martial arts enthusiasts. But the real impact was personal, private. Two men from completely different worlds, one from Hong Kong's brutal film industry, the other from Atlanta's comedy circuit, found common ground in the most primal form of communication, physical challenge, and mutual respect. Chris Tucker never publicly challenged Jackie Chan again. He didn't need to. He already knew the answer. And Jackie Chan never doubted Chris Tucker's heart again, because anyone willing to step into a ring and test themselves against the unknown, regardless of the outcome, had earned something money couldn't buy. That night at the Staples Center, beneath the lights and the roaring crowd, in front of police families and news cameras, two things happened simultaneously. Chris Tucker learned humility, and Jackie Chan remembered joy. The combination created a moment that transcended the simple charity event it was meant to be. It became the night two friends discovered they respected each other more than they'd realized. And sometimes that discovery requires a challenge, a ring, and the courage to answer the question, "I'm better than you." The answer, as it turned out, was that better was the wrong word entirely. Different, certainly, but in that difference lay mutual admiration that would define their partnership for years to come. The bell rang that night for a 3-round exhibition, but the real fight, the one against ego and assumption, lasted only seconds, and both men won.